Hello, this is Mrs. Woodings. Today's story is But I Read It on the Internet by Tony Buzio, illustrated by Sakiko Yoshikawa. Find out today if George Washington had wooden teeth. Because Hunter Harris is a fackmeister of the first order. And when his teacher challenges this class to a presidential fact-finding contest, Hunter finds himself in a showdown with Carmen. True facts are found in books, declares Hunter, while Carmen insists that the internet is the best source of knowledge. Who will win, Hunter or Carmen? Books or the internet? Will Hunter discover that the internet can provide true facts? And will Carmen learn that not everything there on the internet is true? And together, will they solve the question of George Washington's teeth? But I read it on the internet. The first thing I noticed when I walked into class on Monday morning was the bulletin board. I grinned. Who did Mr. Dickinson rope into making all those flags around the sign? Just then, my librarian, Mrs. Sorobsky, sailed in. I checked her accessories. You see the flags? Yep, she was definitely in on this plan. Then she dumped an armful of books on Mr. Dickinson's chair. What's up with the flags, I asked. Oh, this research project is custom made for a factmeister like you, Hunter. And before I could say factmeister, Carmen Rosa Pena tripped through the door and dropped her half-eaten granola bar on the floor. She scooped it up and she took another bite. Oh, disgusting, I said. 5-second rule, Hunter Harris. It takes 5 seconds for bacterial contamination. Says who? Carmen popped the last bite in her mouth. Says the internet. Oh, brother, I muttered. Carmen and her infallible internet. After all, Mr. Dickinson dug right in. He flashed a KWL chart on the whiteboard. Who knows something interesting about a U.S. president? And someone yells out, Abraham Lincoln was the tallest. Kennedy was the youngest elected. Oh, one president was born on the 4th of July. Mr. Dickinson typed as fast as he could. Then Carmen's voice cut through all the others. George Washington had wooden teeth. No, he didn't, I said. Yes, he did, she insisted. Hunter and Carmen, Mr. Dickinson said, you seem to have different opinions. Let's start with the source of your information. Well, I read a biography about George Washington, a true book, I said. Then Carmen threw me a withering look. But I read it on the internet. So Mr. Dickinson grabbed his laptop. Follow me, class. After lunch, Mrs. Sorobsky gave us our final homework assignment in the library. I noticed she changed her accessories. She said that books aren't always the best source for our research questions, but I want to know the current weather in Washington. Should I use a book or the internet? The internet, of course, Carmen cowed. Besides, sometimes we don't have a book with the answer. but we do always have an internet connection. For homework, well, first of all, I wanted to say sometimes we don't have an internet connection, but then she wouldn't know. You see, some of us don't have a computer or the internet at home. For homework, prove or disprove one presidential fact using the internet only and evaluate your website source using the gizmo, which was Ms. Sorupski's special evaluation chart. Stop and see me if you need to use computers this afternoon or tomorrow morning. Oh, wouldn't you know it, Carmen and I both chose George Washington's wooden teeth for our research. I spotted Mrs. Sorupski on bus duty after school. I've got Cub Scouts right now and an allergy shot tomorrow morning, I said. So can I just use a book for the assignment? No, absolutely not, Hunter Harris. We both laughed. You see, he didn't have a computer or the internet. Could your grandmother maybe drive you to the public library tonight to do some online research? The Abernathy twins zipped past and Hugh yelled, "Yeah, the public library rocks!" Have you ever been there? She asked. I shook my head. No, I hadn't. Well, I'll write your grandmother a note, she said. Ask Mr. Charay to help you. He's the librarian in the children's room. That evening at the public library, I was nervous when Grandma pointed me to the right room, and then she sat down to read a magazine. But when I walked in, Mr. Charay asked or said, "You must be Hunter. Mrs. Sorupski said that you were coming." We got right down to business. Now, I don't know how skilled you are online, so if I tell you something you already know, just humor an old man, okay? I smiled. He was funny, like Miss Sorupski, but in a quieter way, and without all those accessories. Mr. Charay said, "Let's try a search engine first. If we need more website suggestions, we can move on to a general search." He suggested I type George Washington, wooden teeth, in the search box. Lots of website suggestions popped up on the page. Be patient, Mr. Charay said. This is where we're going to use her gizmo chart to evaluate websites. It'll sure come in handy. We looked at each site until we finally found one that was informative, easy to use, and best of all, accurate, right there on the internet. Then we filled out the gizmo, which was a chart for the site, and emailed the URL to Mr. Dickinson. That would be how I could cite my source. Then Mr. Charay took my hand. I hope I'll see you regularly now to use our computers and to check out our books. I really liked using a computer. The next day was the showdown. Mrs. Sorupski had posted one sheet for each fact our class was researching on the library walls. When Carmen whispered to me, "I've got the final proof," I just sat quietly next to her with my gizmo sheet folded in my pocket, smiling like a Cheshire cat. At last, Mrs. Sorupski called us up. Carmen zipped up to the chart with a red marker in her hand. And I ran, I had to follow her quickly. Like a game show host, Mr. Dickinson said. "And now, Carmen and Hunter for the $1 million prize." Just kidding. Did George Washington have wooden teeth? Everything happened at once. Carmen's marker flashed up to the chart. I pushed her hand aside, snapping. He did not. And Mr. Dickinson cheered. You're absolutely right. I blinked, and there in front of me was Carmen's bright red circle around no. What? I turned to Carmen. I mean, right. What made you change your mind? I read it on the internet, but this time I knew how to make sure that the internet was right. And she winked at Hunter. The end.